The date is February 14, 1943, and the place is the Kasserine Pass, a jagged, wind-scoured gap in the Atlas Mountains of Tunisia that is about to become a slaughterhouse for American innocents. For the young man of the 1st Armored Division, the war had mostly been a series of long marches and skirmishes against inferior Italian hardware, but today the air feels different, heavy with the smell of scorched ozone and diesel. Through the salt-rimed lenses of his M70 periscope, a 19-year-old gunner named Miller watches the horizon shimmer with a heat haze that shouldn't exist in the winter chill. Out of that shimmer, a shape begins to coalesce. It is massive, boxy, and painted in a ghostly panzer gray that seems to swallow the desert light. This isn't the nimble Panzer III or the reliable Panzer IV they'd been briefed on. This is something primordial, a rolling fortress of 90-degree angles and terrifying scale. Miller's commander screams for a shot, and the 75mm main gun of their M3 lead barks, sending a solid armor-piercing shot screaming across the sand at 1,700 feet per second. On any other tank in the world, that hit would have resulted in a catastrophic brew-up, a fountain of white phosphorus and molten steel. But as the smoke clears, Miller sees the impossible. The shell has hit the enemy's vertical front plate and simply disintegrated into a spray of harmless yellow sparks. The grain monster doesn't even flinch. Its massive 8.8-centimeter barrel slowly traverses with a hydraulic whine that sounds like a predator growling in the dark. A split second later, a flash of orange fire erupts from the Tiger's muzzle, and Miller's world vanishes in a deafening roar of rending iron as his tank is punched through like a tin can under a sledgehammer. This was the birth of tigrophobia, a psychological contagion that would spread through the Allied ranks faster than any physical disease. It wasn't just fear of a tank, it was the existential dread of facing a weapon that broke the established rules of combat, a machine that could kill you from a distance where you couldn't even see its bolts. Intelligence reports from that week describe American crews abandoning perfectly good equipment at the mere rumor of a heavy silhouette in the trees. The Tiger had achieved something rare in military history. It had become a legend before it had even won a campaign. But every legend has a creator, and to understand why this 11-foot-tall Titan was destined to eventually stumble, we must travel back to the drafting tables of Europe and America. In the city of Kassel, Germany, we find Erwin Otters, the lead engineer at Henschel & Sohn, a man whose mind operated with the rigid, uncompromising precision of a master horologist. Otters didn't just want to build a tank, he wanted to build the ultimate tank, a vehicle that reflected the Third Reich's obsession with technological superiority and quality over quantity. To Otters, every weld had to be perfect, every gear in the complex interlocking wheel system had to be a work of art, and the armor had to be thick enough to make the crew feel like they were inside a mountain. He was an artisan of destruction, convinced that one invincible knight on the battlefield was worth 100 common soldiers. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, in the industrial heart of the United States, a man named Harry Knox was looking at the problem through a completely different lens. Knox wasn't interested in invincible knights, he was interested in the arsenal of democracy, the terrifying power of the American assembly line. Knox knew that a tank was not a monument, it was a consumable tool of war that had to be shipped across 3,000 miles of stormy Atlantic Ocean. He understood that if a tank was too heavy for a standard crane or too wide for a European railway bridge, it was useless, no matter how thick its armor was. While Otters was hand-polishing the internal components of a few hundred Tigers, Knox was designing a machine that could be built by former refrigerator mechanics and school teachers in Detroit.
This was the silent opening move of the greatest mechanical chess match in history. The German obsession with the perfect machine versus the American mastery of the perfect process.
One man was building a weapon to win a duel, the other was building a system to win a war of attrition. As the Tiger began its reign of terror in the desert, the foundations of its defeat were already being poured in the concrete factories of the American Midwest.
Erwin Aders wasn't an ordinary engineer. He was a fanatic of mechanical perfection, a man who saw a tank not as a weapon, but as a complex ecosystem. At the Henschel plant in Kassel, he spent nights hunched over blueprints, where every millimeter of the Tiger's transmission had to operate with the precision of a surgical instrument. His vision was aristocratic. He believed a German tank was a heavy knight, designed to withstand any blow and destroy the enemy with a single shot from distances unreachable by mere mortals. But this passion for detail became a trap. Aders designed a unique interleaved road wheel system where the wheels overlapped, providing an incredibly smooth ride for the 56-ton machine. However, he failed to account for one thing: the war in the mud and snow of the Eastern Front, where repairing a single inner wheel required removing 5 others, turning maintenance into a multi-day nightmare. While Aders was polishing gears, on the other side of the Atlantic, Harry Knox was implementing a philosophy that was the polar opposite of German aesthetics. Knox was a prophet of the assembly line. He understood that war was a mathematical problem, won not by the man with the best tank, but by the man whose tanks were the easiest to deliver and repair. He designed the Sherman suspension to be modular. If a unit was damaged, the crew could simply unbolt it and replace the entire assembly in an hour, right in the field. Knox deliberately limited the Sherman's width so it could fit through standard European railway tunnels and into the cargo holds of American Liberty ships. It was a clash of ideologies. Aders was building a monument to German engineering, while Knox was creating a universal soldier's tool that could be mass-produced by the tens of thousands. When comparing the Tiger and the Sherman, the most critical figure isn't armor thickness, it's the total volume of production. Throughout the entire war, Germany managed to produce only 1,350 Tiger I units and around 500 King Tigers across all factories. In that same time, American industry alone cranked out 49,234 Shermans, while the British produced another 17,000 tanks on the same chassis. That is a ratio of nearly 36 Allied tanks for every single German heavy Predator produced during the conflict. Logistics was the silent killer. The US sent over 4,000 Shermans to the USSR under Lend-Lease, where Soviet crews nicknamed them the MCHA. On paper, the specs were mismatched. The 56-ton Tiger had 100 millimeters of front armor compared to the 30-ton Sherman's 51 millimeter sloped plate. Aders' legendary 88mm gun could pierce a Sherman from 2,000 meters, while the standard US 75mm gun could only penetrate a Tiger's front under point-blank range, under 100 meters. But battle reports tell a different story. In North Africa, of the 31 Tigers deployed in early 1943, nearly 2/3 were lost to mechanical failure before ever seeing a Sherman. On the Eastern Front, the scale was apocalyptic. Over 1,100 Tigers were lost in battles against the USSR, but nearly 50% were destroyed by their own crews due to the inability to tow a 56-ton wreck from the mud. The human cost was devastating. Out of approximately 50,000 German Tiger crewmen trained, over 22,000 were killed, wounded, or captured. American M4 Sherman crews suffered 1,500 deaths in combat, a remarkably low number considering they were often the attacking force. This was due to the wet stowage system. While early tanks caught fire in 80% of penetrations, the new Shermans burned in only 15% of cases. An American tanker had a 3% chance of dying if his tank was hit. For a German and a Tiger, that risk was nearly 5 times higher once the armor was breached. Escaping a Tiger was a nightmare. The loader's hatch weighed over 100 pounds, and if the tank tilted even slightly, it became impossible to open. By May 1945, Germany had fewer than 50 operational Tigers left in the entire Third Reich, mostly abandoned for lack of fuel. Conversely, the US ended the war with a surplus of over 10,000 Shermans, which became the foundation of the post-war armies of Israel, France, and South Korea. The Tiger became a legendary ghost of a lost empire, while the Sherman became the workhorse that rebuilt the modern world. American command knew that in a one-on-one duel, a Sherman stood almost no chance against a Tiger, so they turned tank warfare into a team game. The standard wolf pack tactic dictated that while one or two Shermans distracted the Tiger with frontal fire, 3 others would flank it at maximum speed. While the Tiger's massive turret turned slowly to acquire a target, the lighter Shermans had time to pump shells into the vulnerable rear engine armor, or thin side plates. Veterans of German heavy tank battalions recalled this with horror. One Tiger gunner later wrote, "We felt like giants being eaten alive by ants. You could destroy 1 Sherman, 2, 3, but 5 more would instantly take their place as if they grew right out of the ground," another tanker remembered. But the most terrifying enemy wasn't another tank, it was the radio inside the Sherman, which allowed for an airstrike to be called in within minutes. German crews called the P-47 Thunderbolts butchers, as even 100 millimeters of armor offered no protection against their rockets and 500-pound bombs. "When the planes appeared, our tank turned into a steel oven," wrote a driver who survived an air raid in Normandy. Even if a bomb didn't penetrate the hull, a near miss often threw a track, jammed the turret, or concussed the crew, turning the invincible machine into a stationary target. Tiger tankers often recalled a feeling of total helplessness, possessing the world's best gun but being unable to turn it due to a broken track or a lack of fuel. It was the combination of mass production, team tactics, and total air superiority that rendered the Tiger's technical edge irrelevant on the battlefields of Europe. The story of the Tiger and the Sherman is more than just a tale of metal and guns. It is a lesson in the clash of 2 different ideologies of war. Germany bet on quality without compromise, creating an engineering masterpiece that proved too complex for a massive war of attrition. America bet on sufficient quality and mass production, creating a tool that could be delivered anywhere on the planet and repaired in an open field. The Tiger remains in history as a symbol of fear and technical might, becoming the most famous tank of World War II despite its small numbers. The Sherman became a symbol of victory for democracy and industrial power, proving that wars are won not by duels, but by logistics and economics. Today, surviving Tigers stand in museums as monuments to engineering pride, while the Sherman's philosophy, reliability, mass production, and modernization formed the foundation of modern tank design. In the end, the better tank wasn't the one that was stronger in a paper duel, but the one that was able to reach Berlin. Which side of this steel duel resonates with you more? German engineering excellence or American mass-produced power? Share your thoughts in the comments. Could the Tiger have changed the course of the war if more had been produced? Your support helps us create new episodes about the legendary weapons that reshaped the world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next battle.